Now, welcome to another lightning response video, where this time I got one question, though tomorrow I think I'll try to do another thunderstorm video where I answer a whole bunch of questions in one long video. But anyway, let's get to this question from Jeffrey Gill, who asked, "Hey Thor, like many things in life, I don't understand why both can't be true at once. In other words, it's possible that the community has issues the same as Disney does. What I'm trying to say is, I don't think Disney getting their act together would do as much as you think at this point. If Star Wars content was suddenly perfect, whatever that means, the amount of rage and hatred-fueled content that started around the sequels is far too profitable of an industry. The YouTube algorithm is great at feeding you what you want to hear, and there's an enormous audience for hate. Obviously, you need both appropriate criticism and praise, and the fans have work to do in that department before we ever feel satiated." And, well, I'd actually say there's an easy, yet difficult, solution to stop the very critical channels, let's call them, here on YouTube, which is for Disney and Lucasfilm to stop feeding them, to stop putting out bad content, bad shows that they can so easily hate on, and that so many want to see them hate on. And that's kind of the part many on the more positive side of things, that's the part they ignore or want to overlook when they get mad at how hateful or toxic the Star Wars fandom can be, which is that it doesn't just come out of nowhere. It doesn't just inherently exist within this fandom. No Star Wars fan wakes up one morning and thinks to themselves, you know what? I'm just going to start hating on this thing that I love so much or have enjoyed for so long. Instead, it's because a lot of the content is just plain bad or mediocre at best, and I'd argue objectively so if we're being completely honest about it. For example, last night, Season 2 of House of the Dragon premiered, and I'm sitting there watching it, enjoying it, and I cannot help but think to myself that this probably has a very similar budget to The Acolyte, and yet this show, House of the Dragon, is superior to that show in almost every way imaginable. And no, they're not exactly supposed to be the same thing, but you can still compare things like the quality of the dialogue, and just comparing that alone makes The Acolyte look silly when you see or hear how well written it is in House of the Dragon. How it makes the characters in that show feel so real, so genuine, and from them come real earned emotions because we've gotten to know and understand them. Which then gets you vested in the characters. It makes you care about what happens to them, to either root for or maybe against them, and hence you care about the larger story. And what's rather curious is that when you really stop and think about what House of the Dragon actually is or is comprised of, well, it's like 90 to 95% dialogue. The episodes are like almost entirely dialogue. It's literally two people, or sometimes more, just kind of sitting in a room talking to each other or at some other location talking to each other. It is not non-stop action that makes House of the Dragon what it is or makes it great. There really isn't all that much action in it from episode to episode. Sure, some have more than others, but on average there's not a ton of it, and it's rarely a giant epic set piece or big epic battle that we get. But that action, when we do get it, and be it large-scale army versus army or something smaller, some sort of one-on-one confrontation or something similar, but that action only exists to further the story of the characters, not just to look or be cool because it's cool in and of itself. And there's almost always consequences for the characters when action does happen, when there's a conflict of some kind, and you know there will be consequences that come from the action, which then creates tension. You're holding your breath and bracing for what could possibly happen, because you honestly don't know what is going to happen. And that simply isn't the case in most modern Star Wars, where it feels like things are backwards to that, where it feels like the characters exist to serve the action, and where that action exists because they think it will appease the audience because it's cool in and of itself, because they think Star Wars fans need cool stuff to keep happening in order to keep them watching. Even Dave Filoni has talked about with the Ahsoka series how he cut out dialogue because he wanted to get to the action, to keep things moving along, because I guess that's what Star Wars should be. It just exists to show action. Problem is, that approach then leaves us with pointless action that usually has zero consequences and where we know nothing bad is going to happen. That leaves us with scenes of characters running through a bombardment from a Star Destroyer, like in the Ahsoka series, without getting a scratch on them, which then makes the bad guys look laughably incompetent and like the heroes are never in any real danger. Thus, there's no real tension, and so what's the point of having action scenes if we know nothing will ever come of it? Or, worse yet, it's actually going to harm the story by, again, making the villains look incompetent. And sure, cool action for the sake of cool action is not always bad. There's a time and a place for it. Nor does every single action scene have to be a literal life and death for the characters. But more often than not, we need to feel like something is at stake or something unexpected could happen. We need to have some sense of fear for the characters we care about. We need to think the bad guys could win or take something from them, or again, something could happen, that there are some sort of stakes here. Even if it is not literal life and death, we need to believe that there is a threat when the bad guys show up. I mean, there is a reason why in a show like Andor, one TIE fighter is terrifying, and yet 100 of them in the Ahsoka series wouldn't have been at all. And that's because in that show, in Andor, action has stakes. With it comes consequences. We don't know who could live or die other than, the characters we know can't die in the show, but they are surrounded by other characters whose fates are not decided or are unknown. Plus, there could still be consequences to their actions beyond just them dying. Again, like I was just saying, not everything has to be literal life or death. Those aren't the only stakes you can ever have. And speaking of Andor, and going back to the question finally, it should be noted that, from what I've heard, the very critical channels here on YouTube actually liked and praised Andor. And a lot of the fans who haven't liked much else Disney Star Wars, they really liked the show too. Same basically goes for the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian, which came out in the wake of the sequel trilogy where, other than maybe now with The Acolyte, Star Wars hate was sort of at a peak. A lot of people, or a lot of channels, not all of them, but they were at least okay with the first couple seasons of The Mandalorian, if not flat out liked it. In other words, like I was saying before, if Disney stopped putting out mediocre shows that feel rushed and have gigantic budgets where you're questioning where did the money go, well, I think a lot of the hate would indeed die down, if not kind of almost go away entirely. I mean, if something is actually genuinely good, do you really want to see people hate on it? I think, or really want to believe too, even though, as you point out, there is profit in negativity, and sadly, bad Star Wars is kind of good for business for a lot of people. But I do think, or hope, most of the people hating on Star Wars actually do just want it to be good. And if it was good, if there was some type of reversal from Lucasfilm and Disney and they just started cranking out banger after banger, they'd acknowledge it. These channels would acknowledge it, or many of the people who follow them, I think, would probably call them out for it. Again, do you really want to watch somebody hate on something just for the sake of hating on it? Or is there something to these hate channels? Is there a reason so many people rally to them? And is it because they are just that disappointed in Star Wars? Like I was saying in yesterday's video, that has to be the question. There has to be something to literally millions of people being upset at Star Wars beyond they're just all haters for the sake of being haters. And I do realize this is all far easier said than done. It's not like Disney and Lucasfilm just need to flip a switch and suddenly they're going to start pumping out good content. It's going to take a change of mindset, essentially. It's going to take a lot of time and effort and money to finally, I think, put out quality Star Wars. Not to mention, a lot of fans are coming from a skeptical position, shall we say. They are expecting not to like it. They are expecting for it not to be good. They are maybe even looking for a reason not to like it. And then, surprise, surprise, of course, they find those reasons, which has certainly happened with The Acolyte, though that's not to say I think it's been good. I just think some have been far harder on it than maybe it even deserves. I don't think everybody gave it a fair chance going in. They wanted to hate it, they hate it, and that's that. Which again isn't to say I think it's been good, but I don't know that it's been quite as bad as some are making it out to be. But anyway, I do think there is going to be this moment in time in the near future, maybe the very near future, that Disney and Lucasfilm will absolutely need to capitalize on if they're going to, shall we say, fix the problems in the Star Wars fandom and fix the problems with the franchise in general. And that is whenever Kathleen Kennedy steps down and leaves Lucasfilm. And that is how it will happen. I don't think there's any way she's ever going to be publicly fired. I mean, behind the scenes, they may strongly encourage her to step down, but she is never going to be publicly fired. But anyway, that's the moment they need to get right, when Kennedy leaves. And again, it is coming soon, one way or another. It is going to happen. She is 70 years old. She is not going to be there forever unless she lives forever because she is the Sith Lord who discovered some unnatural means to immortality just to spite all us Star Wars fans. And when she does go, there is likely going to be this, let's call it a charitable moment from fans. There are many who are looking to give Star Wars a second chance when this happens, who maybe want to see it make a fresh start when she's gone. And if whoever they bring in next or promote to take her spot sort of promises a new direction for the franchise, and then of course backs it up with content to follow, that could sort of turn everything around for Star Wars, I think. That is, again, Kennedy leaving. That is the moment they need to somehow get right. They need to say and do all of the right things, and I think they can fix a lot of the damage that has come about in the past decade or so. And to be clear with everything I'm saying here, and said in yesterday's video as well, but I'm not suggesting radical changes for Star Wars. I don't want to see a huge departure from what it's always been. I don't think or want to see Star Wars be exactly like House of the Dragon or something like that. But the problem is that show and others like it, they do exist. They are competition for Star Wars. People will choose them or subscribing to HBO Max over Disney Plus because it is simply a better show than anything Star Wars offers. And so, again, like I was saying in yesterday's video, it is time for Disney and Lucasfilm to rethink their approach a bit with Star Wars, to acknowledge that the angry fans, that they do make some good points about the quality of what they've been putting out there, and that what people want from entertainment in general these days has kind of changed or evolved over the years. People do want stuff like House of the Dragon. They do want something a little more mature and complex, which again doesn't mean go all in on the sex and the gratuitous violence and all of that, but yeah, maybe make it a little more like that in terms of the kind of dialogue you give us. Make it a little bit, a little deeper than what we generally get. And this idea and defense I see so many use, that Star Wars is supposed to be for kids, which somehow justifies the poor quality of it, I guess. But it is a ridiculous one when you do consider the vast majority of the people who watch Star Wars are adults. And that's not to say we make it completely inaccessible to kids, or that you can't have more kid-friendly shows from time to time. I think the animated shows are a great jumping on point for younger viewers. I think they should always remain that. And I do think the movies can be done in a more traditional Star Wars style most of the time, where they are, they're action heavy, they are skewed a bit more towards the younger audience. But let's be real about it. Again, what most people want from live-action streaming shows these days is something more like House of the Dragon and less like the Ahsoka series. And the numbers very much back it up. The numbers for House of the Dragon, I am going to guess, are going to be crazy, where we know the numbers for Ahsoka were not so crazy. I think people want to get heavily invested in a good, long-running series that takes itself very seriously. They want a show to take the time and effort to create great characters and set up meaningful action that leads to meaningful consequences, and sometimes unexpected ones. They don't want you to skip character building in favor of cool stuff. And I think that's the approach we see more often than not from Disney Star Wars. We see cool stuff in favor of actual good storytelling. As I always say, we see spectacle over substance. Well, I think that's all I got for you this time. Now it is your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you think about this. Do you think hate would indeed go away if the shows just got better? I mean, it sounds like it makes sense to me. Or is it simply here to stay? Will there always be angry fans making noise in the Star Wars fandom no matter how good things might be? Or you can always ask a question for a future lightning response video. All you got to do is start your comment off with "Hey Thor" and then ask away. But whatever you choose to do, leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.